welcome everyone to another episode of Becoming a Professional. I'm your host today, Riley Ramos, and we're filming from Orlando. So, huge fan. Like I said, Disney, please sponsor us. I'm already wearing my Mickey hat, and we're going to be spending some time at the parks. But pretty much going to get into it. We have a wonderful guest today, Kayla Dollar. But before we get into introductions, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Let's see. So, disclaimer, opinions in this podcast are our own and may not reflect the position of Beta Alpha Psi or our respective employers as a whole. But yeah, so that's pretty much housekeeping. Check. And so, yeah, let's dive into it. So, Kayla, why don't you tell us about yourself? How'd you get started with BAP? Where'd you attend school?
Yeah, of course. So, like Riley said, my name is Kayla Dollar. I am currently working at KPMG in Orlando, Florida. So, I'm a staff accountant here in their audit practice. I did my undergrad at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, so semi close to where I believe Mackenzie went
Yeah,
to
yeah.
school. So, I am a War Eagle fan, though, I have to admit. So, not an Alabama
Okay,
fan.
no hate, no hate.
And then I did my master's at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. So I back to BAP. I got started with BAP at UAB, and I was the social chair. So I was always on the social medias, and then just part of all the events that we hosted and everything like that.
Yeah, well, and then now she is the incoming mid-year rep for the Southeast and Rocky Mountain region. So I'm super excited. I got to interview her during the process, and honestly, it was one of the more fun interviews because, if anything, that kind of gave me the inspiration for this episode because we got to learn about your I guess what your most favorite Beta Alpha Psi memory.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the interview was pretty laid back. I would say we started out pretty formally, and then once the ice was broken, it was like, okay, like I could get along with these people,
Oh,
and
for sure.
yeah. So I guess that'll be one of our talking points today
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
podcast. So I can't wait for that. But it's also one of the things Riley and I have in common, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and so topics for today will essentially go around the importance of meaningful networking, and really how that impacts your career moving forward. And it's one of those things that you want to start early in your career. So for our college students, that's the perfect time to really build that network, and it really pays dividends as you progress into your career. And when you're going for that first job, when it comes to networking, you're not that's kind of what the students really focus on,
hmm
that they're like, hey, I want to finish school, I want to have a job lined up, but you got to think big picture. You got to think about networking for that, not only for that first job but that second, third, fourth. I mean, it'd be amazing if you found your dream job right off the bat, but sometimes it doesn't work out like that.
hmm
And so you got to be able to kind of think big picture, be flexible, because life, you don't know what life's going to throw at you, and so you always have that um, that network that you can count on, because it's definitely helped me as I transitioned during my career. So, but to get into the more interesting part about it, is kind of our Kayla and my backstory when it came to the magic of networking. So, like Disney, this is another shout out to you because the huge, big player in this one. And so for me, the biggest thing about networking is that, honestly, if for my story with Beta Alpha Psi, had I not been as active as I was with the organization and um, being open with networking, I would not have met my wife.
hmm
So kind of rewind. Let's see. I think it was 2017. It was the annual meeting. We were in Anaheim, and so we had the Thursday community service event, and we went to, I believe it was one of the Orange County Public Schools, to do like a financial a day of financial literacy. And so I hit it off with one of the other presidents from the other chapter. It was the Western Washington, yeah, the Western Washington chapter, and we were partnered up during the event. And so by the end of it, I was like, "Hey, you're really cool. Do you want to hang out at the Disneyland event? My chapter can come, your chapter can come, and we can hang out." And so my wife was a part of that chapter, and so that's where we met. We met at Disneyland. And so pretty much going like fast forward, after we were both done with school, she pretty much reached out to me and asking about places to visit. So, and also, ladies, please shoot your shot when you have the chance, because you don't know how it could work out. So
I have to interrupt. Was she the first one that reached out?
She was.
I have to admit I was the same way. So
oh man,
that's that in common.
There you go. See, no, I love it. That's amazing. And so it's funny how that all works out. But yeah, so if it wasn't for the organization, I wouldn't have like anything that I have currently, and that's including my wife. So no guarantees that the organization will create that same situation for you, but it has a couple times.
Yeah, for sure. So to follow up on what Riley said, during the interview, I was asked in the interview for the mid-year rep, I was asked like, what's my favorite Beta Alpha Psi memory? And I have a lot of favorite memories with Beta Alpha Psi in terms of networking, in terms of connections with all of my friends. But I had mentioned that, you know, whether it was professionally related or outside of the professional realm, what was my favorite memory? And I met my now fiance at the annual meeting in Chicago. So that one was the 100th anniversary meeting.
100th anniversary.
You said you were at, right?
Yeah.
So we would have known each other, or we
would have crossed paths
into each other. Yeah. And so it was the night that my chapter at UAB won gold, and he was sitting across the table from me. And I remember like we kind of like shook hands, you know, your typical meet and greeting people within, you know, all of these conferences. And he took note of my name from the name tags that we wear, and I still have mine today, like hangs up in my office.
I love it.
And he has his. And so he took note of my name, and at the time when I got back from the annual meeting, I was actually moving to Orlando, Florida from Alabama to work at Disney. So another Disney shout out there. Definitely sponsor Rilley. And so once I got to Disney, I remember a few months had passed, and we ended up reconnecting on our social medias. It actually started with LinkedIn, but we never chatted on LinkedIn. We just like connected, and then from there we went to Instagram. So like there was nothing at LinkedIn or through LinkedIn. So that's like my one thing. I'm like, no, keep it professional. And so we ended up connecting on another social media, Instagram. And then from there, we just started chatting. And so we ended up having our first day at Epcot later that year. So that was like a fun little thing.
Okay. Well, and then as far as when it came to networking and meeting your now fiance, how do you feel that networking has influenced your decision, namely grad school?
Yeah, so now, like, fiance aside, that night that, you know, Delta Chi won gold chapter, I sat with a bunch of the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee students, and Garrett was one of them. And from that night on, we got to talking. Garrett and I got to talking. I spoke with his friends. They kind of let me know about their grad program they had. And at the time, I was still in undergrad. So, you know, like things were just now, you know, getting started in the accounting world. And, you know, I never really thought about like, oh, when I get to grad school, like, what's that going to look like? Like, where am I going to go? And so they told me, they were like, well, you can teach at UWM and get grad school paid for. And so I was like, yeah, like who doesn't want to do that and not have to pay, you know, all the money for grad school.
Right.
And so I started looking into it, and I visited Milwaukee for the first time in January of like 2020. So like right before COVID happened, and I fell in love with the city, oddly enough. So I was like, I may actually move here. Like this could be something I would consider. And so I think it took about 6 months of deciding.
Hmm.
I did a lot of background work. I did a lot of researching. I didn't just like drop everything and go, but at the same time, I kind of did. And so once I finished out my undergrad, I moved to Milwaukee to do my grad degree at UWM. And so if it wasn't for that networking at the annual meeting, I probably would have never went to Wisconsin.
Oh man.
So yeah, I have to be thankful for that as well. And then I have all of those connections and everyone that I met in grad school there who was a part of Beta Alpha Psi that I may not have, crossed paths with at the annual meeting there. So
Cool. Okay. Well, and that's the thing too with various circles, because you have your Alabama family, you have your Milwaukee family, and then now you have your Orlando family.
mhm.
How do you maintain these various relationships?
So a lot of it is like virtually, obviously, because I do not have unlimited funds to travel all the time. But I definitely keep in contact with everyone in Alabama and in Milwaukee now. And so usually it's just over the social medias, is one of our biggest forms of communication. But I typically, or Garrett and I will typically go to Alabama and I will help out with Beta there. I'll go to like a recruiting event one night when I'm visiting my family. And then for Milwaukee, we typically are up there a few times a year. And so I always try to connect with friends up there during that time.
I feel that. And with being the social media chair when you were part of the chapter, that's, I guess people, a lot of times when they ask that question about maintaining these different relationships, is it just a lot? Well, honestly, I feel like it's as simple as just, I guess, keeping in touch over social media, that a simple like here, a simple share there, just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you're still engaged and you're still seeing uh, your different connections, like their various posts. I feel like just being interactive in that way is, it's as simple as that when it comes to keeping up those relationships.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, when, in my sense, I'm in busy season and it's like, okay, well, how do you, manage your connections there? And it's like, well, typically the people I talk to daily, like, it's a simple text of like, hey, like, are you surviving busy season?
Yeah,
And I'll be
yeah.
like, yeah, barely, or yeah, I'm doing good so far. And that may be in January when we're first starting out. But yeah, typically we just try to catch up, text every now and then. And then there are people who, I call pretty frequently. But yeah, LinkedIn's definitely one of the biggest things of seeing like where people are professionally, of like, are they still with their, company, or did they decide to find another opportunity? So that's one of the, I would say, biggest contenders is LinkedIn. And then you have your recruiting events for like Beta Alpha Psi. So we do like an alumni event every year in April. And so that's the one that I went back for, and usually see everyone that like you were serving with at the time. And that's always just a good like get together for everyone.
Cool. So essentially like a reunion.
Yeah, basically. Like
No,
a
I
little
love that.
homecoming.
Yeah, no, because if anything, so a couple days ago, earlier this week, um, we had Meet the Firms night, which was something that I, in a way, kind of started back when I was in grad school,
Hmm.
where initially, now this back in back in my day, um, our Meet the Firms night was a dinner cruise uh, networking event. So we had like all the professionals come out on uh, this yacht and had like a dinner and all that, and it just went up the river and back. So nothing too crazy.
Well, you
But the
lost
thing
me at
is,
yacht. That's pretty crazy. So,
right? Which you think that that would bring in a lot of professionals, but for the partners at the various firms, because they had crazy schedules, needed flexibility. They didn't want to be stuck on a boat for 3 hours,
okay, fair
um,
enough.
and
Yeah.
right, that's fair. And so they weren't. We didn't really have a lot of interaction with the partners from the firms. So I think this was 2018. Decided to change it up. It's like, why can't we just bring it back to basics? We'll meet up um, at whatever museum, something that has enough space for people to like walk around, chat around. Not your typical career fair with the booths, but
Mm-hmm.
more like cocktail tables
Oh,
and
nice.
like a lot more mingling. between students and professionals. So that was kind of my little pet project during the summer to kind of put that together. And so it's been kicking strong year after year. And so that's kind of one of the things that, even though I'm no longer in the public side of accounting,
Mm-hmm.
I'll still make time to come out there. And it was funny because I told these students that gave out my business card, and I was like, hey, if you have any questions about recruiting season, hit me up, let me know. Feel free to send me your resume because I am more than happy to look it over for you to make sure that you have whatever you need in order to like put your best self forward.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like at least being in Beta Alpha Psi as an alumni, it's kind of like parenting where you want to create a better version of yourself moving forward. So, but yeah, no, if anything, that's kind of one of the smaller circles where it's now kind of growing as far as like the new school
Mm-hmm.
students.
Yeah, we, excuse me, we had in 2018, so UAB opened up a new business school. So like we transitioned from an older building to like a more modern building.
Cool.
And so that kind of helped put like the business school in general kind of like on a pedestal for a lot of like student activities and things like that, because we had like the most recent, like the newer building. And so I remember that starting off with Beta Alpha Psi, as a freshman, I got like this email one day and I was just trying to like find a group. Like I was like, I need something to do. Like, how do you make friends?
Mm-hmm.
And I was working all the time as well. So like I couldn't join like a sorority because, you know, you have to devote a lot of time. And as much as I would have loved to do something like that, it just wasn't feasible. And I just got this like email and I was like, you know what, let me try it out. Like it was about Beta Alpha Psi and I was like, well, what could go wrong? And I remember walking in and like, it was a lot of older, you know, your juniors and your seniors. And I was like, what did I get myself into? And so I ended up, you know, they introduced themselves right off the bat and it was Holly at the time. She was our president. And, you know, she kind of greeted me and introduced me to everyone. And so I, you know, attended that meeting and then we moved our meetings from, I believe it was the Hill Center at the time, it was like our student center, but then we moved it to the new business school. And so that really kind of created an opportunity to like see everyone in accounting and finance and IT, because not only did we have our meetings in the business school, now we were able to like take it outside of these meetings and like we all would like network outside of our typical like 3 to 4 p.m. meetings every Monday.
That's cool.
And so you would always see like whoever was in BAP, like you would always see us together in the business school, like we would be in like study rooms and things like that. And so it was one of those things like when we started with Meet the Firms, I had no idea what Meet the Firms was because I was new to everything. And oddly enough, as a freshman, I knew I wanted to go into accounting. So like I was one of the rare people who like actually knew what they wanted to do, like going into college, which is definitely not the norm. So if you do not know what you want to do, that is totally fine. And I walked into my first Meet the Firms, no idea what I was doing, and I didn't even have like a resume. And like I'll never forget being greeted and they were like, "Where's your resume?" And I was like, I have no idea. Like, I'm just here. Like, I saw this event and thought it would be fun to come to. And so they definitely, thankfully, we have a wonderful career center at UAB. And they, like, took me aside and, like, helped me get I had a somewhat of a resume, so they helped me print that out. And I was just a freshman, so there wasn't more, like, you know, I didn't have a job on the line. I was just, you know, communicating and getting to know everyone. And so they gave me that and, you know, it all went uphill from there. But I look back on my first Meet the Firms event and I just take a laugh because I was like, of course, that was me, like just walking in, having no idea what I was doing.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
But it definitely paid off in the end. So I can't complain.
Right. Well, I mean, as far as like coming into your college career, already knowing and having that direction of where you want to take your studies, like what made you choose accounting to begin with?
So I wish I had this like really cool story that like I had like a moment where I was like, I want to be an accountant, but I really don't. I just remember, like, I'll be honest, I just remember being in high school and this is a long time ago and Yeah, I took a few business classes. Like,
Okay, start at high school.
yeah. So I had actually moved to a different high school like during my time, and they had like I would say more opportunities. So I was able to take like an accounting and finance class, and my parents didn't go to college, so like college was like all new to me in general, and I
Okay.
really liked it. And so from there on out, I was like taking, I think it was like dual enrollment. I believe it's been a
Yeah,
long
yeah.
time since I spoke about high school. um, so I was taking like dual enrollment courses and
Cool.
AP courses, and I just remember being like, "Wow, accounting is where I want to go." Like after all of these courses, and everyone told me like, "You're gonna change." Like most people don't know what they want to do going in, and I was like, "There's no way." Like I was stubborn. I was like, "There's no way I'm changing." Like I'm gonna be an accounting major, and there was a split second there in my first year that I was like, maybe I can do finance. But then I did an internship in finance the following summer, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, back to accounting I go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I just, from the beginning, it was always accounting. And I did try the other side of things, but it was a no for me.
No, I feel that. No, because at least for me, it was also kind of started out in high school too. Because now, kind of differently enough, I, for the most part, am very indecisive about things. Like my wife, she's the one that kind of decides what we have for dinner, and I'm the one who cooks. So that's a little testament to my indecisiveness. But as far as like the high school experience, it was being like that traditional Filipino household, that you're gonna go into the medical field, you're gonna be a nurse,
hmm
something in that aspect. I was like, okay, it is what it is. But until high school came around, I always saw, what was it, the different athletic groups, the sports teams, fundraising that they would sell. I don't know if they did this in your high school, but they would sell candy bars, like stuff that you would get at like Costco or Sam's Club or
Yeah,
something, like in bulk.
the band sold the candy bars. We
Yeah.
sold like these coupon cards to like your
Interesting.
typical,
Okay.
local restaurants. That's usually what we did.
Okay. So I went the candy bar route, and I was like this is really easy because a lot of people would just come up to you, and it got my little entrepreneurial situation got so big that I was known as that kid that was carrying around a duffel bag with a bunch of like candy boxes, and my teachers at the time would just set time at the beginning of class, like, all right, you get the first 5 minutes, everyone get their snacks, and
I
then
love
we'll.
that.
So it was very much a supportive environment,
hmm
and so I knew at least like, medical is not for me. The business side definitely uh, intrigues me more.
hmm
So that was something that I wanted to pursue, and it was again being indecisive going into college. It was okay. What are you going to major in? Oh, I can't decide. Accounting, finance, double major, done. So, and that was my
That's
thing where,
that's what I believe it was the double major that I started out with. I
yeah,
had really high hopes. I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do 8 a.m. classes. Like
yeah,
I'm so used to this, it's
yeah.
gonna be no problem. And then it was definitely the opposite.
Well, thing is with Beta Alpha Psi being, for the most part, it's accounting heavy, but they are trying to be more inclusive of finance and information systems. Um, but for our local chapter being on the accounting heavy side, that that in itself really impacted my decision to uh, go into the different opportunities that are at least in public accounting. Now we also have opportunities in government and of course industry. But at the time, with how much interaction I was getting with networking,
hmm
it was all mainly in the public accounting space because this is the time where it's recruiting season for internships and stuff like that.
Yeah, we. So one good thing about UAB, we're in Birmingham, so we're like, in a huge business district. So we kind of see all sides of things. Whereas like the University of Alabama and like Auburn University, they focus on like either Birmingham or like Atlanta. So those are like your two big cities that they will try to recruit to. But being in the middle of all that, we were able to network with your typical big four firms as well as your smaller firms. And I think that's one of the good things about being where we like being at UAB and having that availability, because not only did we get to see like, okay, this is what happens if you choose big four, but like you can also get a really great experience at your smaller firms. And in general, they're not really that much smaller if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're someone starting out in accounting or in finance or IT, like you hear so much about Big Four, especially with Beta Alpha side, that it's like when you get to know everyone and when you start that networking, you see like also the other side of things. And I do remember like our chapter was accounting heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But towards the end, we were starting to see finance, and we did actually have, I think, two
Yeah.
members in IT, if I'm not, it was like one or two.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things now that I kind of look back on when, being in a professional field is how much IT plays a role. It's like, wow, like you could really use that IT knowledge like in your career because you have all these IT systems and like, yes, we have the auditing knowledge or the tax knowledge, but IT is like increasing daily. And so I think that's going to become a huge
It's gonna be a game
benefit.
changer.
Yeah, coming like in these next few years for sure. Like if you're thinking about IT, that's definitely a route to go. Like if that's your thing. Unfortunately, it's not for me because me and technology do not get along, but we try our best.
It's okay. That's why we have supporting roles that will
Yes.
like when in need. But and then earlier you mentioned about like how the organization with Beta Alpha Psi gets students engaged. Because for me, ODU, Norfolk, Virginia, it's very commuter heavy setup. So for
Hmm.
me, it was you literally go to school, go to classes, and then you either go to your job or you go home. It was like bam, bam, bam. All right, done. I'm out. So being in something like an organization like Beta Alpha Psi definitely kept me engaged with being on campus, being more active. Where it got to the point where other students, um, not in the organization, would come up to me and ask, "Are you that guy in Beta Alpha Psi? Are you that guy that like the guy that's always like business attire and all that?" And so like it really speaks to like how you present yourself, your network that you're building, who you associate yourself with, that it travels like not only around the business school but also to the surrounding majors on campus.
Oh,
So
for sure. Like we in our business school, we had like a TV that like showed everyone's internships, like, and it was like beta alpha, it was all kinds. So like not beta alpha psi related, but it was funny how people would be like, oh, like I saw you on the TV, like what are you up to now? And then like with Meet the Firms, they would take pictures and stuff, and they would post those like on the website, and it would
yeah,
be like, I saw your face on the website, and I'd be like, yeah, like of course, a front and center, like mid conversation with someone. But yeah, no, when you're in an organization that is so well known throughout your business school, and UAB is the same way. Like we were commuter heavy. Most people lived at home, or they lived off campus, but most people still lived at home, most likely.
hmm hmm
And so it's like, we had it at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So like, how do you keep the students there that, go to class at like 9:15? And so one of the things is we always had like study groups in our little, we had like rooms you could reserve for groups. And so if there was time between your class and the Beta Alpha Psi meeting, you would just get with other Beta Alpha Psi individuals and you'd all just study together, whether you're in the same class or not.
yeah,
Chances are you are if you're accounting or you're finance. And so that was just one of the great things of like how to keep you connected when you're not like fully involved on campus because you are commuting or you are working all the time. And so there are times where I would come in and like be in my work attire and then I'd go to Publix afterwards like for the night. So yeah, I mean it was definitely something that I was grateful for because not only could I be a part of something, so well known, but like I could also be able to like work and I wasn't ever like hindered because of that. So that
right.
was one of the good things about it.
Yeah, no, and that actually reminded me of a time where I think it was probably one of the first meetings that I attended as a candidate.
Mhm.
So not even a full fledged member, but just like getting to know the organization and seeing if it's something that I can be a part of, or just testing out whether or not I would be an involved member. And so I was always like, for me, I was very shy, in my shell, and I would always sit in the back row. So the president at the time, Laura Fox, amazing person. she reached out to me, like literally just walked up to me at the back of the room and was like, "Hey, I've noticed that you're usually sitting back here. How would you like to be a part of our best practices team?" I did not know what best practices was at the time. And honestly, if it wasn't for stuff like that, where it's just an easy, "Hey, we'd like to include you in this." If it wasn't for stuff like that, I wouldn't have been as active as I was, because that really set the tone um, for me being out of my shell, being in a way, I kind of think of it as like a flight attendant, where it's like you stay in your box, you're practicing your script, but it's one of those things that helps you get through the shyness and out of your shell. And so, but it all started with someone just reaching out and saying, "Hey, why don't you be a part of this?" And pretty much fast forward, did best practices, did project run with it, all these different competition groups. You mentioned the gold challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also something that I took pretty much as like another pet project 2 years in a row. And it was one of those things where um, like, hey, I want to be like one of those top 10 chapters, essentially what the top 3% for all the chapters across um, the country, and I guess
Yeah.
overseas too.
I would say it's something that I guess going, you mentioned like, getting that, like, hey, we want you to be a part of this. That's one of the big things that we strive to do. And my chapter was, if you saw someone new in the meeting, it was like, be sure to talk to them. Like, don't let anyone just like sit there by themselves, because like, especially if you're stepping out of your comfort zone to go to something to, better yourself in your career, and no one's going to talk to you, like, that's just not cool. So we
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to make people feel included. And so my first year in beta, once I got, past the just like the candidate stage, Holly, our president at the time, she was like, "Why don't you come to Jacksonville with us, like for the mid-year meeting?" And I was
Nice.
like, "What's a mid-year meeting?" Like, like I was so new to things that it was just like I didn't know how anything worked, but I was so involved in beta that they were like, "You would be, a great candidate to come with us." And so we went to Jacksonville, and then later that year we went to Chicago, and I just was like, wow, like a year ago, or a year prior, I was just walking into something that I was like, let me just give it a shot. Like,
That's a
I
quick
got an
turnaround.
email about it. Yeah. And then here I am a year later in Chicago, and I've never traveled anywhere outside of like Alabama, Tennessee, the surrounding states. And so it really opened up like the horizon to connect with like even more individuals. And that's just one thing that I always remember. And so, you could always find me, like, there was 3 places you could find me. It was at work, Beta Alpha Psi, or like hiding away in the library trying to get my stuff done if I wasn't in class. And so like if I wasn't at work or studying, like I was always involved in Beta Alpha Psi. I was always hanging out with, the crew from BAP. And so that's just one of the things like I always remember, and I'm so thankful for. And unfortunately, I feel bad for some of these candidates that during COVID didn't get
Yeah.
that opportunity, because everything was just different. And so not being on campus, all they got was virtual meetings. And I'm like, BAP outside of virtual meetings is like a community in itself. And so that's one thing I love about it.
Yeah, no, and it's a great segue as far as the virtual aspect of it, because I feel like now more than ever, your network is so much. It's so important to build that network, because so to put things in perspective, we had different networking activities at this past annual meeting in Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the number one piece of feedback that we got from the students was that we need more networking events. The students are already requesting for next year's annual meeting that, hey, can we have like some sort of like speed networking kind of activities? Which 2 3 years ago, you probably wouldn't catch anybody asking about speed networking. That it's like, this is really awkward. We're just talking for 5 minutes and then switch
Like
over.
speed dating in a
Exactly, speed
way.
dating.
Like the
So
timer goes off. All right, next.
exactly. And so this was like so weird at the time, but now that's like, hey, the students are starving for networking opportunities, that they want this kind of stuff where it's, you feel like you kind of have to make up for lost time.
No, exactly. Because I think, and I'm a really outgoing person. So, like, talking to people is like my favorite thing. And when you are in like this bubble by yourself, it can get really hard. And so for a student who is starting out in the professional world, you don't know, like, there's so many like what ifs, there's so many questions that are unanswered, and you're like, you feel like you have to be like this certain person, and you don't really get to be yourself because you're like, okay, what if I mess up? Like, what if I say the wrong thing? But as you start to meet people like us who are, you know, not partner level yet, we can kind of have that in between. Students start to realize that it's not all about like, you know, having to be so uptight 24/7. It's like, you know, you can be yourself, but also be a professional. And so I think that's one of the things like going into it. You know, I was so worried of like, what if I say the wrong thing? Well, you know, like, what if they don't like my first impression? But it's like, we're all human in the end. Like, it's okay to make mistakes. And like, as long as you respect everyone, you know, it's all well in the end. But if you don't get that experience networking, then you go into your first job and you're like, how do I speak to people? Like, how do I work with different teams, you know? And so that's just one big thing about networking that I love so much. And so that's why I'm such a big advocate for it. And I'm always willing to hop on teams meetings, even with my local chapter back home. You know, I'm like, hey, if anyone needs advice, like, not sure I give the best, but I can try. I can give it a shot. Like,
Yeah. You're
and
still
so
a resource for them.
exactly.
You're there.
And, you know, it's all about that. And then the experiences that you can do while you're in college, and those come from networking. Like, you don't find out about, you know, X internship unless you talk to people. And so when you think of Beta Alpha Psi, I guess in like the national aspect, I think that it would be cool to do something like that, you know, get some professionals together in the meetings, and, you know, and I think also students could probably benefit from speaking to each other, like, because you may have one who has the networking experience versus one who's just starting out. And so they can kind of connect, you know, it'd be like a peer connection. So I think that would be something really cool to implement in the upcoming meeting.
And so, I mean, with this past meeting, it kind of was a good experiment to see, like, okay, we're going to go something non-traditional because we did stuff like a fashion show, an etiquette dinner.
I saw that.
And
That's
so that was
so much
fun.
fun.
It was fun. Your boy was in a onesie, Eeyore, not Stitch. But it was a lot of fun. And so it kind of gave us an idea of like, okay, what else can we play around with for next year's annual meeting, which is going to be in Orlando. So your hometown, you're gonna be
making
there.
a 30-minute drive down I-4.
It's not bad.
Meeting, so I cannot complain.
There you go, not bad. Well, yeah, and then I mean that kind of goes into our closer question over here. So like, how did BAP help you become a professional?
Yeah, so, you know, I've harped on the importance of networking this whole time, but basically the reason I say that, and that is a good wrap up, is because of my networking opportunities, I was able to do an internship actually within my first year of college.
Solid.
With Wells Fargo. And so that was more or less the finance side of things when I was a really big, like, oh, I'm going to be a double major. And then quickly decided that I was not going to be a double major. But it was good to get that experience and know that, like, hey, at least I tried it, because when you're in college, you have that flexibility of, like, you're not destined to one job. Like, you can try out a few different internships. And I think that's why I'm such a big advocate for those. Because you don't want to go through college and then get into something for the rest of your life that you absolutely hate. And, you know, you're stuck with, like, okay, I did all of this for nothing. And so I did that internship. And then I actually moved on to my Walt Disney World internship next after that. And so that was kind of a little, you know, the college program wasn't really accounting related, but it was like, what if I wanted to go work for Disney accounting later on? And so I got to experience a different city. I was out of my hometown, and that was really nice to get out. And I met people from all over, including my best friends from Australia. So it's funny that, meeting another Australia person during my interview. And then from Disney, I went to KPMG, and I actually started out with KPMG Birmingham, recruiting with them. And then I did a 180 on them and decided to go to KPMG Milwaukee. So they were more than happy to put in that referral to the Milwaukee office, but they were like, I can't believe you're leaving us. And I was like, I know. I felt so bad because like I had connected with all of them and thought they were wonderful. And it's actually, I still talk to them to this day.
That's awesome.
And so they're amazing people and I'm so thankful for them. But I think like that's just something that I was able to do with everyone that I knew because of networking and those connections. And so, if anything, you do like one internship or you can do multiple. It's totally up to you. So I think, getting yourself out there and, taking a leap of faith is like one of the most important things to do in your college career.
1,000%. I couldn't agree more with you. But that's all the time that we have. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us from whatever platform you're tuning in from. Also, check out the show notes for our various social media pages and official BAP swag. So you'll see I'm wearing another one of our bonfire shirts. So check out the one for Find the Fraud. So that one's my personal favorite. But all that can be found in the show notes. And Kayla, thank you for guesting on our podcast. You are simply the best.
Thank you for this opportunity. A huge fan of podcasts, so
I love it.
So thankful for it.
And with that, we'll see you on the next episode of Becoming a Professional. Hi, everyone. Riley here with the credits. This episode, titled The Magic of Networking, was hosted and produced by yours truly, Riley Ramos, and accompanied by our special guest, Kayla Dollar. The episode was recorded and edited by The Podcast Doctor in Orlando, Florida, so be sure to check out his studio. Music was sourced from Resolute Audio and fine-tuned music on Adobe Stock. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Becoming a Professional.